Arewa and the crisis of leadership, lessons from history and the challenge of renewal. Leadership has remained one of the most discussed issues in contemporary northern Nigeria. Across towns and villages, in markets and universities, in mosques and public gatherings, many citizens expressed concern about the apparent decline in the quality of leadership and governance. The widespread poverty, insecurity, unemployment, educational decline, and underdevelopment that afflict many parts of northern Nigeria have led many observers to ask a fundamental question. How did a region once celebrated for its administrative excellence and political stability arrive at its present condition? To answer this question, it is necessary to examine the historical foundation of leadership in Arewa and the principles upon which governance was established. The leadership crisis confronting northern Nigeria today did not emerge suddenly. It is the result of a gradual departure from values and institutions that once guided public life and ensured accountability. Historical foundations of Arewa. The political geography of contemporary northern Nigeria owes much to the 19th century jihad led by Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio and his associates. Before the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate, the region consisted of several independent Hausa kingdoms, numerous chiefdoms, and stateless communities. Political authority was largely localized, and each state operated according to its own traditions and customs. The jihad transformed this fragmented political landscape. By the second decade of the 19th century, the Sokoto Caliphate had emerged as one of the largest states in Africa, stretching across vast territories and incorporating diverse peoples under a common political and ideological framework. More importantly, it introduced a new conception of governance founded on Islamic principles of justice, accountability, consultation, and public welfare. The significance of this transformation was not merely territorial, it represented a profound change in political culture. Government was no longer viewed solely as an instrument of power. Rather, it became a moral responsibility designed to secure the welfare of society and protect the rights of citizens. Leadership as a sacred trust. At the heart of the Sokoto Caliphate's political philosophy was the concept of leadership as a trust. Public office was not regarded as an avenue for personal enrichment, but as a responsibility for which leaders will be answerable before both society and God. This principle shaped the conduct of rulers and administrators throughout the Caliphate. The writings of Sheikh Usman bin Fodio, Sultan Muhammad Bello, and Abdullah bin Fodio repeatedly emphasize that Rulers were custodians rather than owners of public resources. They were expected to administer justice impartially, protect the weak, defend society against aggression, and ensure the welfare of their subjects. This understanding created a culture of accountability that extended beyond formal institutions. Leaders were conscious that their actions will be judged not only by their contemporaries, but also by divine authority. Such a worldview served as a powerful restraint against abuse of power and corruption. Institution of accountability. The success of the Sokoto Caliphate was not solely based on personal virtues of individual leaders. It was supported by institutions designed to promote accountability and good governance. A judicial system staffed by judges trained in Islamic law ensure that disputes could be resolved according to recognized legal principles. The institution of Baitul Mal or public treasury managed state revenues and expenditures. Administrative structures at both central and provincial levels facilitated the collection of taxes and the provision of public services. Education occupied a central place in the system. Scholars enjoyed considerable influence, and rulers frequently consulted them on matters of governance. This relationship between knowledge and authority helped create an environment in which public officials will be held morally and intellectually accountable. Security arrangements were established to protect life and property, while market regulations sought to prevent fraud and exploitation. The objective of governance was not merely to maintain order, but to create conditions in which individuals and communities could flourish. Colonial rule and transformation of governance. The British conquest of the Sokoto Caliphate at the beginning of the 20th century marked a significant turning point in the political history of northern Nigeria. Although colonial administrators remain many indigenous institutions through the system of indirect rule. These institutions were increasingly redirected towards the objectives of the colonial state. Emirs and traditional authorities remained in office, but ultimate authority rested with British officials. The priorities of the colonial administration differed significantly from those of the pre-colonial system. The primary objective of colonial rule was to serve the economic and strategic interests of the British Empire. Consequently, governance structures were adjusted to facilitate taxation, maintain law and order, and support colonial economic activity. Infrastructural development, educational expansion, public services were introduced, but these initiatives were often limited by colonial priorities and resources. Industrialization was not pursued on a scale, on a scale sufficient to transform the economy of northern Nigeria. The region remained largely dependent on the export of agricultural commodities and raw materials. Perhaps more importantly, the moral foundation that had previously limited political authority to religious and ethical accountability gradually weakened. Authority increasingly derived its legitimacy from colonial power rather than from the consent of the governed or adherence to established moral principles. The First Republic and the preservation of public service ethics. When Nigeria attained independence in 1960, the new generation of leaders inherited institutions shaped by both indigenous traditions and colonial administration. Many of the leaders of the First Republic had been influenced by the values of public service that characterized earlier generations. Among them was Ahmadu Bello, the Sardona of Sokoto and Premier of Northern Nigeria, and Ahmadu Abubakar Tafawa, Nigeria's first prime minister. Whatever disagreement may exist concerning their policies, these leaders generally demonstrated a commitment to public service, personal integrity, and modest living. Their administrations invested heavily in education, agriculture, healthcare, and infrastructure despite limited financial resources. The establishment of institutions such as the Ahmadu Bello University, the Bank of the North, the Northern Nigeria Development Corporation, and numerous educational initiatives reflected a vision of development grounded in collective progress rather than personal enrichment. This tradition persisted among many leaders of the Second Republic. President Shehu Shagari, despite the challenges confronting his administration, maintained a reputation for personal honesty and simplicity. His career reflected an older understanding of leadership as service rather than entitlement. Emergence of leadership crisis. The roots of contemporary leadership crisis lie in the gradual abandonment of this principle. Over time, political office increasingly became came to be viewed not as a trust, but as an opportunity for personal accumulation. Public resources that should have been invested in education, healthcare, agriculture, infrastructure, and economic development were diverted into private hands. Several factors contributed to this development. The proliferation of military interventions weakened democratic institutions and accountability mechanisms. The rapid growth of oil revenue created opportunities for rent seeking and corruption. Patronage politics encourage loyalty to individuals rather than institutions. Electoral malpractices undermine public confidence in governance. At the same time, educational standards decline in many areas, with ethical values that once emphasized honesty, service, and sacrifice became increasingly marginalized. The culture of public service gradually gave way to a culture of entitlement and self-enrichment. The consequences are visible across northern Nigeria today. Poverty remains widespread despite abundant human and natural resources. Educational indicators lag behind national average. Youth unemployment continues to rise. Insecurity has disrupted economic activities and displaced communities. Public infrastructure remains inadequate in many areas. These challenges are not merely economic or administrative. They are fundamentally linked to the quality of leadership, the way to renewal, or the path to renewal. History demonstrates that societies rise and fall largely on the basis of the quality of their leadership. Northern Nigeria is not an exception. The solution to the region's challenge does not lie in nostalgia for the past. The Sokoto Caliphate and the First Republic cannot simply be recreated. However, the principles that guided their most successful leaders remain relevant. The first requirement is the restoration of leadership as a trust. Public office must once again be understood as a responsibility rather than a privilege. Second, institutions must be strengthened so that accountability does not depend solely on the personal virtues of individual leaders. Effective legislations, independent judiciary, transparent financial system, and free media are essential. Third, educational system must be revitalized to cultivate not only technical competence but also ethical responsibility. Societies produce the leaders they educate. Both merit rather than patronage must become the basis of appointment and promotion within public institutions. Finally, students themselves must embrace their role in demanding accountability and participating actively in governance. Leadership is not solely the responsibility of leaders, it is also shaped by the expectations and actions of society. The crisis of leadership confronting Arewa today is not inevitable. History produces history provides numerous examples of leaders who govern with integrity, accountability, and commitment to public welfare. The challenge facing contemporary northern Nigeria is not to recover those values while adapting them to the realities of the 21st century. The future of the region will not be determined by its resources, its population, or its geography alone. It will be determined by whether it can once again produce leaders who regard public office as a sacred trust and who are prepared to place the welfare of society above personal gain. Only then can the promise of Arewa be fully realized, and only then can the region reclaim its historic role as a center of civilization, learning, and good governance. Thank you for listening.